Welcome everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Today's live stream will be a little bit different because when you see this, at least I hope, I will be in the air on my way to Taiwan after a year and I would say more than a year, of being housebound, of just being here. Finally, I will be flying to Taiwan to play John Corigliano's monumental concerto and also a recital featuring a little piece by Brahms. It happens to be a quintet. Also a Prokofiev sonata, Yu Hui Chang, and I'm sure I'm pronouncing her name totally incorrectly, but her three fantasias for solo clarinet, and a work of my own, which I titled Firefly. We thought perhaps maybe we should cancel today, but thought that would be such a shame. So instead, what we are doing is actually presenting reruns of the first two of our live streams. Of course, without the political harangue that I always give. I think some of you probably will be relieved about that. But anyway, please enjoy, be well. While I'm in Taiwan, I hope to actually continue this. So I hope to see you again, at least in this cyberspace atmosphere. Be well. Take care. Bye-bye. Right now, what I would like to do for all the clarinetists who are in the audience is just explain a couple of the very, very basics of the clarinet. Then the first has to do with the embouchure. And the embouchure has been a subject of, I think, great misinformation and misunderstanding, I should say. And the important thing to know about the embouchure, first of all, is that the embouchure is not a thing, it is not a state, it is actually an action. And to illustrate this, I have very simple this rubber band. See, if I hold the rubber band like this, even though it looks like I'm doing nothing, in fact, there is great force involved in trying to maintain this kind of pulled openness. If I release the force, it goes back. And this is essential to know for the embouchure, so that what we feel here is like the mouth here is a rubber band. And you stretch that rubber band like that. Okay. And this actually is an exercise I have. This is the very first exercise that I would give to you. You just take the rubber band and first you pull. Like that. So you feel what's happening. And then you need imagination. So you take and you feel that this is the muscles right around here. You pull this way. And there's something more to understand about this, is that our jaw moves this way. So there's actually one direction, and one directional motion that we do. Otherwise, of course, you have to move your whole head up like this, and that doesn't quite make sense. So you feel the strength of this pull this way. So, and what that means is that the embouchure actually requires a great deal of what we can call isometric force, where you're actually pulling. You're not simply opening, but you're sort of pulling against jaw pressure, which wants to go back this way. Okay, together with that, it's important to feel what's happening inside the mouth. And that is the most difficult thing for a teacher to explain, because, of course, it's out of our sight. But we can try to feel it. And to feel it, first, you have to feel that there's a he, e, 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 and that the back of the tongue is always sort of, again, pushing this way, e, up and widening. Yeah. So you get a kind of yeah. And the front of the tongue, it pulls down, yeah, and creates a kind of spoon this way. And to feel that, you can take this rubber band and you pull it, and at the same time, you sing. You try to go as high as you can. Like that. If you can go higher, of course. And you will feel that the tongue is also pulling this way, just like the rubber band is doing. And just like the front of your mouth is doing. So, this is the very first exercise, and together with that, there's one more exercise, where we take the reed this way. It doesn't have to be a reed, it can be anything, in fact, that you can put in your mouth, but a reed kind of perhaps makes the most sense. And you just put it and you pull it into your mouth. Like that. So you're kind of making an embouchure. And then, just like you did here, you sing and you stretch your mouth. And what is most important is that the reed, as you open the mouth up, doesn't go, but actually goes up. This way. You see. Then you take the clarinet and let's say you just play a note like that. Then you do your exercise. Oh, I actually forgot a part. I have to backtrack. The jaw here should open. So if you take your fingers and you put this way, you just go ah, you feel that there's a space. So it doesn't bunch up this way, but ah. And then you go So together with this, this opens up here as everything pulls this way. And at the same time, you make sure that the reed goes up as much as possible. Then you take your clarinet and you can still feel here, you only need one hand. And then you play just a note, and you feel how the air moves through the instrument this way. I'm sure that many of you will have questions about this, and please feel free to write them down, and I will actually try to explain in more detail.
Your message.
Do I have a message?
Message.
Where?
Send a message.
Oh, send a message. Yeah. I will become a little more adept at this next time. This is a trial run, as I said. Okay. Then the next most important thing has to do with understanding the registers of the clarinet. And for that, we have to go to the harmonic series. Here, we have the piano. Can you still hear me if I'm over here? Yes. Okay. So let's say we have one note. Now that note, of course, that fundamental pitch will contain harmonics. In fact, an infinite number, theoretically. And if we take our finger on the string, if we touch in the middle, we actually get the octave, which would be the same as just holding that octave. If we touch a third of the way, we get the octave and the fifth. A fourth of the way, we get 2 octaves. There, we get the fifth. And we can continue on to get higher and higher partials, or higher and higher harmonics. We often call these harmonics partials in English. And if I play, the clarinet also has partials. The significant feature about the clarinet is that if we figure that the first partial is the fundamental note, then it will skip the even partials, basically. There's a reason for that, and I will explain that in another of these live streams. But it's clear enough to say right now that we skip the octave and we go to the 12th, which we call third partial. And then we will skip the fourth partial, which is 2 octaves, and go to the 5th. We will skip the 6th partial, which is 2 octaves and the 5th, and go to the 7th partial. on and on. We go to the 9th partial, 11th, etc., etc. Now, these partials correspond to the different registers of the instrument. So we start here, and then that's all first partial. We move again to third partial, and we can go a little higher on instrument like the bass clarinet. You can actually keep going up on third partial, and there are usable notes. But basically, after we go to the Do or the C, there we go to fifth partial. Fifth partial, we can go to there. Then we can go to seventh partial. Let's say we start on what should I start on? I'll start on the long F. That's all seventh partial. Then we can go to ninth partial. 11, 13, and etc. Okay. Now, this gives you kind of schema of what is happening with the clarinet. Right. Okay, that's good. Now for the important part. The clarinet works in a way very analogously to a string. And the reed, the vibration of the reed, changes just like the string when you play different harmonics changes. So in other words, when you're playing a string, the string is vibrating, the first partial or fundamental note, it vibrates in 1. When you touch the middle, it will vibrate in 2 parts. You touch a third of the way, it will vibrate in 3 parts, etc., etc., etc. Now, what you have on the reed are nodes which correspond to the nodes or standing nodes on a string. And what that means, very simply, is that if I take pressure here of where I'm pressing the reed, it's basically the pressure of the teeth under the lip. This is going to be hard to see probably, but that, if I move down, I will get the third partial. If I move down farther, I will get the fifth partial. I can keep going. That way I go up to seventh partial. So you can play. See, what I'm doing is I'm just playing a D, for instance, here, and I'm just holding it down, not using register key or anything like that. And because I'm playing in different parts of the reed, I'm sort of touching, I elicit different harmonics on the clarinet or different partials. So then, this can pull down. You can pull down, and then can keep going down, or just like on a string, and this is a very important point, on a string, the harmonics are symmetrically located on the string. So, of course, the second harmonic is only one position. The third, or I should say the first harmonic, second partial, I'm sorry. The third partial, or second Right? The 12th has two positions. So you can actually elicit one place there or one place there. I can demonstrate it on the string. If you say, let's say we take that again, and now we're taking the C. There. Those are the two positions on the string which will elicit the third partial. So you can actually, when you're playing, go one way or the other. And how you do that will depend on your mouthpiece and your mouth, etc., etc. The important thing is to experiment with that. So for me, for instance, I will keep going down, and then if I go to seventh partial, most of the time I go up again. That way. That gives 7 all the way to 9. This way. So I play here. I go down. Fifth partial also. Then most of the time I will go back up, seventh partial. Then up, up, that way. So in other words, I can go throughout all the registers in a very even, easy way, because I know where to elicit the proper harmonic on the reed, or the proper partial on the reed. And that gives me tremendous control. So if I'm playing I can play those very high notes, and I do not use very much pressure. I use a very exact position. So again, and I can play them at any dynamic. Now, I can do that. All of you can do that as well. Right now, I'll just summarize very much what I was talking about before. It has to do with the fact that the way the clarinet works is with a fundamental register and harmonics above that. All wind instruments work basically the same way. The special feature, of course, is that the clarinet skips, if we call the fundamental pitch the first partial, it skips the even partial. So we don't have the second partial, we don't have the fourth partial, etc., etc., etc. And of course, that contributed to the fact that the clarinet is a bit of a latecomer in terms of musical history. So the first actually evidence of the clarinet came from the workshop of Joseph Denner, and that was already in the beginning of the 18th century. And Denner obviously somehow understood that if you take the chalumeau and you try to overblow, you get some kind of squeak. And he understood that that squeak was actually a 12th or one of these odd partials. 1 second. Are you everything okay? Okay, good. Yeah. I think the next session will be really very professional. Okay, bear with this. Okay, and if we look carefully, we'll see that the difference between the Shalom, I don't have one here. I was going to do a whole presentation about performance practice and historical instruments in one of the later ones. But if we have our imagination, the Shalom basically had a key here and a key here, and they were at the same level. Now, the inspiration of Denner or whoever it was who actually invented the clarinet, so to speak, is to understand that you need a register key which will elicit the third partial, the odd partials. And let me put this on here. Okay. If we actually check the instrument and we check where this is, it's approximately 1/3 of the way down to around here. So that register key that we have elicits the third partial. And of course, there's a possibility of moving it up and down a couple millimeters, but you cannot move it particularly from this position. Otherwise, you end up not at the right place to, in a certain sense, touch or elicit the third partial. So that's the essential acoustical nature of the instrument. Now, along with that, though, we have the issue that the register key does not work perfectly throughout the whole range. Of course, if you're playing bass clarinet, you would need 2 register keys. Probably 3 would be even better. And on a regular clarinet that we have 1, and it works well enough. But as you go up and down, it works less well. Let me see if I can find a reed that works. This is interesting. What did I use last time? Let me see. Quite soft, but a little too soft. I think I used this one. But, uh-oh. Stuff is stuck. Here we go. No, still. Here we are. Okay. But, I wanted to use the B-flat clarinet somehow, not the A clarinet, although I don't know why. I think everyone's just laughing at me now. Completely. So, here we go. Only a half-step difference, but anyway, okay. So I'm sure that you all have had some experience teaching beginners, or you maybe even remember when you just started. And of course, the first issue was you go here. Oh, I can't do it. That is going over the break, as we call it. And of course, the issue there is that we are simply switching from first partial to third partial. And if you remember from the last time, the issue of the reed and how it is analogous to a string vibrating, so we need to find a node on the reed which is lower, so that, and what happens to people is that through probably force of will, simply, the student opens the mouth and more clarinet comes in. that way. And you can all do an experiment. You can bite very hard and then pull down, and you will actually get the note to speak, even though you're using much more pressure than you should and then probably that you ever will use. Okay, now the next issue is this. We go up, and you get that. And go, oh no, what happened? I can't play. But what happened was this, that after a certain point, the register key stops functioning. So, in other words, the register key is really optimized for something around here. And you can actually do an experiment, and if you just take the right place on the reed without the register key to get the third partial, so and put the register key down, you will find that you get no change of pitch. If you go lower or you go higher, you do get the change of pitch. And finally, if you get, after a certain point, this stops working. And if this is not helping you particularly anymore, what is critical is the positioning here. So when you have the register key working, you have leeway in terms of how you can play. But in the extremes of the instrument, you don't. So what happens here, again, you pull the clarinet to find the place, and you can play correctly. So in fact, for all of us, a very good exercise is to play the third partial without the register key, and we can start it at a nice and we can try to play the third partial up and down without this, and that way we actually experience where we have to play on the reed. Okay. Now it would be nice if perhaps, if any of you who are listening, or watching I should say, have questions as I am presenting this, please chime in and I will try to answer what I can answer. Has anybody? No? And may I ask also, how is the sound? Can you hear? Okay, great. Because last time it was a little problematic for certain people. Oh, I'm so glad. Okay, so this actually works. Wait a second. What I wanted to say about the register key applies to all the registers, actually. So if we are playing fifth partial, we have that, and when you go again up, that same thing can happen. We need to be in the place here. This way. Okay, so once again, the essential exercise that we have is that we take if you take your finger here and you go in, out, out, in, out, out. Or you can say, o, u, o, something like that. Then we can get. And in the beginning, when we do this exercise, the important thing is don't try to slur, but actually feel that you relax or even open your mouth in between. But don't use the tongue because that just confuses things in terms of the sensitivity of your lip. Then when you can play these going up 1, 3, 5, all the way up and down that way, you can move on to doing higher partials than that. So you can go from it's a pretty bad read. That's a little better. Okay. So, and they can do that up and down, of course. And you know, if you can do from the very low, you can get lots of different harmonics on the clarinet, and that actually is the beginning of being able to play multiphonics in a very convincing way. And I think we will get to that perhaps in the later one of these sessions. So then after you can play higher partials too, then you need to try to slur. And slurring is much more difficult, but it is the most important thing in terms of learning to negotiate these partials. That way. Because most of the time, we won't be playing detached notes, but we will actually be playing phrases which move up and down this way, which are more often than not actually slurred. So this is, again, the basics of the harmonic structure of the clarinet and how we have to proceed in order to learn to negotiate the different registers in a very clear, stable, effective way where, in fact, you can play all of those very high notes with great definition and also without a feeling that, oh no, I won't make it, or that you'll start bleeding because you're trying to bite so hard. And what is a little bit counterintuitive is that as you go up on the clarinet, in fact, you should open your mouth and not close it, not bite down.
I have two related
Questions?
questions
Oh,
I will
fantastic.
show you now.
Yes.
And here.
Yeah.
This is,
Oops.
hi.
Hello.
She's
Yes.
walking
The term partial.
Yeah, Jiggy
Okay.
from Korea.
Yes, I will do that.
This is
yes.
the one, and also Miha Germek.
Yes.
This
Yeah.
question.
Okay. Yeah. Go ahead. Go ahead.
You read
It
that.
goes quite high. Do you think tongue positions? Yeah, I will do that. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Anything else?
That's
right now?
that's a related question.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yeah, I was actually the second question has to do with the tongue moving, and I was going to get into that also. The first one wanted me to explain partials. I think people who didn't come last time. Okay. We can call partials harmonics. I and many people in English use the word partials. Now it's called a partial because it's a part of the total harmonic spectrum which is included in any note. So I should probably just recapitulate what I was talking about in the very beginning of the last time, which comes, if I go back to here, and we take, for instance, there, we can call that the fundamental pitch, or we can call that the first partial. And then that octave we can call the first harmonic, or we call it the second partial. So now I will just play just talk about partials. Thank you. So this will be second partial, and third partial, fourth partial. Let's see, I'm going to push this back. Fifth, you can hardly hear it. Yeah. Sixth and seventh partials. So they all involve touching a node on the string, which makes the string vibrate in a certain number of parts. And the reason I like partials is that it actually tells us how many parts the string is vibrating. So in other words, the first partial, the string vibrates like this in 1. You touch in the middle, we call that a node, or in English we call it really a standing node, because in fact that position will not move. Then the string will vibrate in 2 parts. You touch 1/3 of the way for the third partial, and the string will vibrate in 3 parts. You touch 1/4 of the way, and again, string will vibrate in 4 parts. I don't know if I did 4 or not, but that doesn't matter. Anyway, and et cetera, 5, 6, 7, and theoretically, there's an infinite number of possible partials that there are, and that's actually quite interesting. And one reason why, for instance, instruments which are larger, like in the winds or in the clarinet, the bass clarinet, for instance, or in the string world, let's say the cello, can actually go as high as the smaller instruments, because that you have more length that in order that you can actually divide. And that's also why, for instance, the E-flat clarinet has more difficulty playing very high than the B-flat clarinet does. Okay, so hopefully this is clear for partials. Let me ask if it is. You can't. Is it?
Okay, there another question.
Yeah, wait. Then let me do the other question.
Okay, yeah.
First, another person mentioned that when he does the partials, he does the tongue position. The tongue position changes, and I will be speaking more about that. I think maybe now is a time to do that. But most important thing here is when you're doing the exercise that you discover what works. What I'm telling you is what I would call experiential. In other words, it's not something that comes out of particular theory or whatever, although it has something to do with that, with the theory and with acoustics, but the actual mechanism you will discover. And it's, of course, a little more complicated than I'm explaining now. But if you can do it, it sounds good, you're doing it correctly. If it doesn't sound right, you're not doing it correctly. So there should not be any kind of doubt in your mind about whether it's working or not. Okay, anything else?
So I go to the related.
Yeah, let's see.
We have a more question about the other things, but the one thing is related question is, what do we be an easy and simple way to explain this to children?
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, of course, this is very interesting and very important. How do you explain this to children? I think in the beginning, maybe you don't need to go into all the theoretical background, to talk about the partials and the harmonic series and this and that and the other one. And of course, your student's just going to fall asleep. You may fall asleep trying to explain it too. But you just have them do. You just very, very much, I think you start with this here, and then, you can even just take, for instance, blah, 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 blah. I'm not, I'll put it over here, yeah. You can even take just the mouthpiece and have them just do this, so that this is not, of course, the way you're going to play, or the way your student is going to play, but this way, and then feel that the mouthpiece goes in, out, in, out. And they can feel where the teeth are feeling the reed underneath the lip. So in, out, out. And actually, the important thing for all of us to realize with this, not only exercise, but with this motion, is that for us, when we are doing it, it feels like a lot. It feels like you're going, wah, like this. Oh, I'm opening my mouth so much. But for other people, it may not even be apparent. Okay. Now, before I go on, I want to also just mention about the idea that you should never move the embouchure. Then I will talk about tongue position also. And I believe that this comes from a misunderstanding. And this is what I mean by that. Now, if you actually don't move, then you get something like that. Or if you have more mouthpiece in the mouth, you can get more. But certain notes will be stuffy, certain notes will not speak, etc., etc. Now, if you play like that, the feeling that I have, for instance, is that every note speaks with the same amount of ease. So there's no note that's difficult, no note that's badly out of tune, etc., etc. And that feeling can be very stable. So I think that people misunderstand that feeling for a concept where physically you do not move the embouchure. I don't know if that makes sense, but in any case, that's the way I look at it. And I have to say that much of this, what I'm talking about now, came when I started to teach people in a serious way, and I started by actually teaching pretty much the way I say I was taught, and the way sort of standard teaching methods explain things. So I explained that no, you don't move them. I'm going to show you everything is this way. And I was wondering, well, why is it that I can do things, but I can't get my students to do them? Then I looked inside myself. And I found that, in fact, I do things which are contrary to what I was explaining. And what I've been trying to do since then is actually explain how I do things with the hope that when people understand that, the whole security and level of playing the clarinet will change. And I think actually it has changed in the world quite a bit in a very good way. Okay, so that's that. Now about the tongue position. Okay. And I don't like the word position. And for this, I have to go back to here, and I have my rubber band still. And if we remember once again from this, from my last stream, we have the rubber band, and we feel that here is like a rubber band. And at the same time, you stretch this. The exercise is that you sing, and that way you'll feel that the tongue is stretching this way. So the back of the tongue stretches up and actually widens at the top, and the front of the tongue pulls down this way, and in fact creates kind of a spoon. If this is the tongue, it sort of goes like that. And what you will feel is that if this is the top of the palate of your mouth, this is the back of your tongue will push here and this way, and maybe a little forward moving, and the front will actually push down on your jaw. So I think what happens probably is that the tongue, in fact, pushes the jaw in the different directions, down or up, or relaxes and goes up. So when the person who's I'll show you. This is my screen now, so it's like anyway. So the person who asked about the tongue, I think it's very true that the tongue is an integral part of what is happening, and what would be actually a good dissertation topic for a doctoral student who is actually combining music and physics would be actually, I would say, music, physics, and biology. Would be to actually figure out really what is happening here. But for us, what we need is just the experience of how it works. Okay.
One more question, maybe we can go.
Yes.
So, this is an interesting question.
Yeah.
From Samada Marabashi. Thank you.
To reach hard notes. Okay. Yeah. He's
question.
asking about he said, is the strength of the reed important for reaching hard notes? It's both yes and no. So this is this reed I have here. And I can't really get up higher than that because the reed is quite soft. This is a kind of reed I would never actually play in real life, only in cyberspace, perhaps. But the issue, though, with the reed is that usually in the beginning, any reed, whether it's hard or soft, will be able to play throughout all the registers. But as it goes on, the reed becomes more inundated with moisture, you can say, and actually that is the vibration, the vibrating of the reed actually causes stress to the reed. So if the reed is softer, generally, finally, the reed will not be able to vibrate in the parts necessary to create the very high notes. So you do need to have a reed which has enough resilience, especially sort of round here below the tip, to produce the very high notes consistently through a long piece, let's say. So in the beginning it will work, but at the end maybe a soft reed will not work so well. One thing though is even if the reed is soft, if you let go of it for a minute, it can actually regain some of its resilience. So it may not work, you let go, and then you will find that it will work again. Then you have to realize that the higher the partial, the more places you have on the reed which will work to produce that partial. So it could be that if you have a soft reed and you generally feel that on your mouthpiece it's more comfortable to play higher. For instance, if usually on my mouthpieces, which are quite long and in the facing, I like to go up, so I play. I keep going up this way, yeah. But if the reed is very soft, and probably this reed will end up being that way, but I'm not going to be playing it for long enough time for it to happen right now, I will actually do the opposite. And keep going down this way. You see, so I go into to the harder part of the reed, and then I can sort of coax the reed to vibrate in enough parts to produce the very high register. Okay, so I think I dealt with those questions. So I go back to the tongue issue now. So we have this exercise, and then the next exercise I have is here you open the mouth here, so you feel that this opens, and that's critical, so that the jaw is facing this way, sort of opens here. And I should mention that several clarinet players have come to me who have jaw problems or sometimes severe TMJ, and that actually helps alleviate that. So the more you can feel when you're playing the clarinet that this is open here, the healthier basically your jaw will be, I would say. As long as you don't sort of push it down so much, of course, you can overdo anything. So you do that first, and then you feel that you're doing with the rubber band, the same thing. And then what you do is you take the reed here, and then put them out, and you pull it into your mouth. But as you are singing to get higher and higher, so that you feel the stretch of the tongue, you also feel that the reed pulls up this way here. So you're this way maybe. And that actually will show you what I could say the correct embouchure is. But again, the important thing is don't think about it too much. And this is something I will explain in a moment. But what we do with this kind of exercise is then you just play and you feel what it feels like when you play with this sense of stretching. So this, you feel that the tongue is doing things here. And I will talk more about this right now, that the embouchure itself is not a thing. It's not a position. It's an action, or I could say even series of actions that we have. So it's something that is dynamic this way. And even if you're just holding a note, you don't just hold, but you actually, in a certain way, resist. And it's just like when I was saying, when you're holding this rubber band in stretched position, it takes force to do that. And let's say I'm doing this, and I look very calm. Someone going by would think, oh, you're doing nothing. But in fact, there's a lot of force involved just trying to hold this open. And that's what happens here.
That must be a
Yes.
related still to talking about personal question.
Yes, of course.
This is Maya. Hi, how are you?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Did you read?
Yeah, I don't just see. Let me see.
You just read them.
Different fundamentals for the same sound. Where's the required? Yeah. Well.
Yeah.
Okay.
Also.
Yeah.
Amy, thank you. This.
Yes.
How to practice hearing.
The fifth. Oh, while playing.
Mm-hmm.
Hearing the fifth while playing the
third
partial.
You don't need to.
No, you don't need to do that.
Right. That's my question.
You don't need to do that. Yeah.
Okay.
Okay. I will. I see. Okay. Now, first of all, the important thing is don't think about it. Think about things. This is a very important subject, and it has to do with the difference between what I would call two kinds of knowing. Because there's a knowing what. Like, well, I know that I'm in the room today, this my room, and I know that I'm in New York City. And I know that 2 + 2 = 4. That's knowing what? Does it equal 4? At least in this universe, I hope it does. And knowing how. And knowing how to do something is like you know how to walk. You know how to eat your food. You know how it is. But the problem we have with knowing how is that if we confuse the knowing what and knowing how, we can develop models which actually are not correct, that will get in the way of your actually knowing how to do something. And it's may be that you have to know a little bit about knowing what. So I give the partial, you know that here, that way, that's 1/3 partial. I know that that's third partial. Now, someone asked about hearing the fifth partial. You just do it. That's fifth partial. That way. So you need to know kind of how a bit. No, I'm sorry. You need to know what in the beginning, but how you get there. You don't have to say, oh, I have to move this here and I have to move that there and this and that, and then it didn't work, but I did everything right because I moved this, I moved that, and I moved the other thing. Instead, you experience what it is, and when it is right, when it works, it is right. You see. So, that way. I should actually mention more. You need to know a little more knowing what about partials on the clarinet. And it's the fact that the partials actually go flat on the instrument. And that's why we can't play all the registers with the same fingering. I wish we could. But in any case, we have to keep sharpening notes in order to actually produce the right pitch. So once again, from here, this is on a B flat clarinet, it's a D, A, and should be F sharp, or concert C, G, and E natural. But what happens is, and that's almost right. And then the next one, though, the fifth partial, is basically almost a half step flat. So instead of an F sharp, it's just an F that's a little sharp. That's why we open the fingers that way and actually raise the pitch. But we still should feel that that note comes from this D that's here on the clarinet. Now let's go one higher. We go to, for us, an E. There. And then the B again is almost correct. And then we make it a little sharper. And if you want, you can even add. And what we get is what should be a G sharp, but in fact is an exact half step too low. So it becomes a fantastic G. And for me, it's the G that I use, I would say 92% of the time. I have 7 other Gs that I use, the other 8%. But that way. You see. Then, so we have to account for the fact that the partials go flat this way. But the overall structure is always the same in that we do have for 1, 3, 5, etc. And you wonder about how do you hear the note. Let's say, well, I'll do this again. So if I play, oh, I missed third partial. I did that. You just keep moving until you find it. There. Then let's say we're going to fifth partial. Oh no. That actually ends up being a seventh partial. We don't even have to know that for the moment, but you say, wow, that feels too high. And then, okay, that's fifth partial. This way, you move there. And once again, here we have knowing what. I think everyone's going to get confused. But you take a string, and of course, the higher the partial, in between, and the simplest thing to show is if you do the second partial, let's say in the middle of a string, you're going like that, the middle. I wish I had some kind of whiteboard or blackboard, but we can have our imagination. This way, in the middle. If you're not quite that way, you will get a different partial if you touch, because you will be touching a place which will elicit a different number of vibrations. And that happens on the reed also. That's why you can get that before probably you get that. So this is more this way. Okay. And once again, we go back to knowing how. So what is important is that you do and you experience what sounds good, what is correct. And that's why in the beginning, you don't try to slur through, but open your mouth, relax here, and really move. You see, and what works, works. And basically, you have to practice this a lot so that these partials become your friends. Anyway. And I always give the analogy of string players who are always practicing shifts, because you have to practice going to the same place all the time. It's not sort of, oh, one day is here, one day is here, one day it's here. The same thing on the clarinet. It's always there. So you have to practice going to the same place that way. And for that, we never get to be so accomplished in the way we play that we don't have to practice it. And I practice it a lot myself, yes, of course. I don't know if that's answered questions yet, but now more about the tongue position. The basic shape of the tongue will always be up in the back and pulling down in the front. But there will be different variations of that depending on the register you're playing. And that will also work with the jaw this way. And again, just experience it. Experience what sounds really great, and that's correct. And probably until you actually experience it, you will not really understand what I'm talking about. That way. So hopefully, can I go on to something else, or is this you think is enough? Or do we have more questions?
A lot more questions.
Yeah. Well, let me ask
actually,
questions. Yeah. So I should answer
one more. It's kind of
yeah.
It's a little from Harry.
Yes.
Hi. From Helsinki.
They don't allow you to practice full sound. I know.
How do you practice if the neighbor don't allow you to play full sound?
With full sound. Yeah, I know. And especially nowadays, because we have all students all over are housebound, and can't go to the practice rooms in schools, or even the professionals may have studios, they can't go there. So we're actually at the mercy of our neighbors. So I think you have to give them earplugs. I'm joking, but I don't know what to say exactly about that. I always think it's important to negotiate so that there's some portion of time you can actually play with a full sound. And other times, one thing that you see, actually learning the partials, I always come back to this, is it allows you to actually play very softly throughout the instrument. So you can actually play softer, and so if you want, something like that. But of course, it's not ideal, and you have to experience being able to use air in a way that's very expressive and includes dynamic contrast. So I don't have a real answer to that except try to negotiate.
Alan Kay said it, leave the reed off.
Yeah, you can. That's possible. The only problem if I leave the reed on, that's a. You could play sort of like this. Probably don't get quite a sound, but you don't really experience what the clarinet should be. Yeah. And of course, if you're just practicing technical things, and I do that myself, is I will practice without putting even the clarinet in my mouth sometimes, so I feel the finger patterns. This is again a learning how, because you're learning the motion of the fingers this way. Okay. Let's see. I don't know if this was the same reed or a different one. Anyway, so that was the other thing I can say is good luck. Maybe give your neighbors a bottle of wine. Well, I don't know, because you can't even go out to buy it. This is a problem.
You should not see them. Knock the door.
That's right. You should not even see them. That's right.
Do we go next time, maybe?
But, well, are there more questions related to this?
Basically, that's it.
Yeah.
Okay.
Actually, I want to say one more thing, because I would like to get through a lot of this sort of very basic technical embouchure stuff now, because in later classes, or not even classes, live streams, I would love to deal with music itself and with the expression of playing. But of course, in the beginning, we need technique, and that's an important part. So this has to simply do my final mention about the embouchure. And many people say for the embouchure you have to take the corners and push them in, like that. And this I also see as a kind of half-truth. And the reason why is that if you actually are focused on the sides of your mouth, like this, then the front of the mouth loses structure. You see. But if you just feel this kind of rubber band stretch through here, the sides go in a very clear way. So when people say you have to pull the sides in this way, it's not wrong, but it can be very, very easily misinterpreted. So my advice always is don't worry about that at all, and worry about just a stretch here, like that. I know some people talk about the top lip pulling down, and of course that's completely correct and makes a lot of sense. You just feel this rubber band pulling down your mouth this way. And when you practice, it's a good idea to do as much as possible. So you feel like that where the limit is. So I was just doing so much that it's like, whoa, it's too out of control. And different reeds will have different limits. And finally, you will actually be able to feel the positioning of the reed, of the embouchure of the reed, which will allow the reed to work in the most resonant and the best way. This sort of answers the question before that I got. And but again, you have to experience things. So you try to open the mouth a lot when and as a kind of addendum, I should mention that I very often have encountered people who take their reed and say, "Oh, the reed, it's too stuffy and hard in this." And I actually go and I try it. I mean, I haven't done this very recently, of course. And I find, no, the reed is very soft. And the problem is that you're squashing it and you actually kill its resonance. So you have to be able to feel how open you have to be. And of course, the softer the reed, the more you have to open the mouth. And the harder the reed, the less you have to do that. Okay, so I have a feeling that I've probably covered what I need to do now. And if people in the meantime have questions later, you can please let me know, and hopefully I'll be able to answer them in the next.
So next, the Andy Simon from Hong Kong asking maybe third reads and double tongue approach.
Yes.
You know,
so I will be doing.
And also how to to play the violin piece. How do you transpose or
Right.
that kind of question?
Right,
Maybe
right.
in the future.
Yeah, there's one very interesting question that Jose Taborda asked before, and he said, could you recommend some strategies about how to improve our study and research before playing a piece? Something like how to build a version. Now that I'm not going to answer now, but I think the next live stream I will devote very much to this question. Which is, how do you look at music? How do you create a version? And of course, if we're doing a transcription, you have a different way that you have to look at the piece than if you are actually playing a piece that is written for the clarinet, for instance. Now, what I want to do is I'm sorry. Yes, okay. I'm getting signals. Is just to move on. At some point, I will speak about fingers, but I don't bother with that now. It's too much boring stuff. Yes, just very briefly, and I will cover next time in greater detail also about the relationship between music, theater, dance, and also poetry, reading, things, all of this, and sports as well. The fact is that playing music is a physical activity, and we have to feel the music with our bodies this way. a very important thing which I heard from the wonderful, brilliant Russian Soviet pianist Sviatoslav Richter, when he was asked, how do you get this fantastically orchestral sound on the piano? And he said, I play with my feet. Я играю ногами. This way. So in other words, there's the action of the feet this way. So I'm going to stand up. See if this actually can see this, because if you stand up, there's a sense of feeling that you're grounded with the feet, and this is a similar feeling that you will have if you are doing sports or if you're involved in martial arts, anything. There's a sense of groundedness always. So it's here, and at the same time, the body picks up. So there's a kind of stretching of the body that we have in general. And an issue I find physically of many people, when they play, they kind of hang on their shoulders. Like that, this way. So this, and that will actually affect our breathing a lot, because if you have this groundedness, then we can actually feel that our lungs are actually doing this, and that also doing this. And perhaps I will get more into that in another class, but that's important. Now, the next thing has to do with the feeling of expression. And that is also something that we have to feel in a very physical way. So if I'm playing, that way, I'm actually feeling, sort of sculpting the music with not only the airstream moving this way, but also with my hands, yeah, and with my feet. So I'm feeling here, and I'm squeezed. I squeeze and lift. Squeeze. Yeah. And that's not so different than if you are actually doing a recitation or doing a monologue, let's say, in a Shakespearean play, and you are expressing this way, that way. You do that physically in the instrument.